morning, everyone. It is tomato season. I love tomatoes. I love growing tomatoes. I love eating tomatoes. I have a little bit of a tomato obsession, which if you follow us on Instagram, you might be catching on to. Anyway, so the tomatoes are a bit late this year. I got my seeds started late. Everything was just kind of, I've talked to other people too, and they said their tomatoes are behind this year. But this morning, I am going to save some seeds from two different varieties that our friends Chuck and Jenny gave us. So I'd started my tomato starts, and I was being all controlled this year. I was only going to do, just what we needed. And of course, I started a few extra seeds, so I called them to see if they wanted my extra starts. And they had extra tomato starts themselves. So we swapped because they recently moved here from Pennsylvania, and so they have different varieties of tomatoes than what I have. And so it's kind of exciting to try something new. And so the first one, I'm going to show you how I save tomato seeds. So the first one is a French beef heart, and Chuck just dropped a tomato off because he didn't have an extra plant this year. He said it's a really nice tasting, meaty tomato that's good for making sauce. And he said it doesn't have very many seeds in it. So I've cleaned this tomato, and when you save seeds from tomatoes, you can still use the rest of the tomato. You can still eat it, dry it, sauce it, whatever you want to do. So I have a jar here where I've taken a paper towel and written French beef heart on it. And then and it's really important if you do this to mark your jars. You would be amazed at how you just don't remember. It's like mark your plant starts, mark your seeds. And what it is you take I'm gonna cut in, and I did wash all this stuff. Okay, so that is a really gorgeous, meaty tomato. And if you're looking for a sauce tomato, you don't want a lot of gel on the inside. Now, and I see a few little seeds over here. Those almost have segments like how an orange does. And my hands are clean, and I washed the tomato before I started. So I'm going to start pulling this apart and looking for, like you can see there's kind of a segment there, a chamber. And it is nice to have a paste tomato that doesn't have very many seeds in it. But if you're trying to save seeds, it's nice to have some. And you can see there's like a segment there, a segment there, and a segment there, kind of wanting to, if you pull at it, it will pull apart. We have a whole 3 seeds off 1 tomato. So from making a marinara sauce or canning these, there's no gel, and there are 3 seeds per tomato. So that is a really nice little meaty tomato. This is not the normal, normally, when I show you the Moscovich, the next tomato, you'll be able to see how it normally goes. This is really interesting. This is something I've never experienced, which is basically no tomato or no seeds. So I might just rinse those off and dry them. Okay, so I'm gonna put that to the side. Next variety is Moscovich, and I have, once again, a jar with a paper towel and my rubber band. I have a bucket down here. I'm not just throwing stuff on the ground. So, now this is a nice little red slicer. It's an heirloom from Russia, and I went online and I believe they may have gotten their seeds from Johnny Select Seeds. And so it has a nice little blossom end, which this is really nice because some tomatoes have a big blossom end that you end up kind of cutting away. Let's see. I have some other larger tomatoes. Okay, so for example, this one is it's an heirloom style one, and so you have kind of a big scar at the end, and most people, like, this is rough, so you don't really want to eat that. So you end up losing a certain amount of your tomatoes. So while this one might be a smaller tomato than that one, you might end up actually with more tomato in the end with these, because you're not going to lose as much. They're a nice healthy plant, a 4 to 6 ounce slicer. They were really early too. That out of all the bigger tomatoes, this was one of the earliest. And also, if I would have had more seeds out of that one, I would have rinsed everything before starting on the next tomato, because you don't want a random seed left, so you'd end up having the wrong tomato. So, nice little red early slicer, and right here you can see there's a nice little chamber of seeds. And then on the other side you have a nice little chamber. So, and another thing that's really nice is you don't have a big core. Now with a really big tomato, basically to hold that tomato onto the stem, you have to have a pretty decent sized core in that tomato just to hold up the weight of the tomato. And you don't really end up eating those. They're kind of unpleasant. And if you have experienced that with different tomatoes, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so what you end up doing is just taking your spoon and you go in and you pull out the gel and the seeds. And you can use your fingers for this. Okay. Also, one thing I find interesting is you can almost predict the size of the tomato when you look at the size of the seed. I've had tiny little tomato varieties that have really tiny seeds, and I've had really big tomato varieties that have bigger seeds that are almost the size of like a pepper seed. And I would say this has a decent amount of seeds, but not a lot. This is once again a fairly meaty tomato. It's interesting, I've found a lot of really wonderful tomatoes come from Eastern European countries. I think that we have kind of a notion of tomatoes being more of a Italian or Mexico or those, hotter climates where you think of tomatoes growing, but actually Russia, the Ukraine, Germany, a lot of places where at least I wouldn't really think of being big tomato growing countries, they actually have some really wonderful tomato varieties. And they have tomato breeders there who have worked on having really flavorful tomatoes. Sansi the cat's sitting down here watching me. I think he's thinking I'm showing him how to save tomato seeds. So there's a few seeds left in the tomato, but I have the tomato seeds with the gel that comes around them. So what I do is I'm going to set this up on the windowsill for about 2 days, and every day I'm going to go by and I'm going to give it a little swirl, because what it's going to do is start fermenting, and that gel is going to kind of start dissolving around the seeds. And that will mean that after that, after about 2 days, and you want to go through and go give it a little swirl because you'll have a mold layer grow on top. If that happens, that's fine, just pull it off. And then I throw our seeds into a sieve and give it a really good rinse under the faucet, which in a couple days I will show you how to do that. So it's labeled, they're in there. So I'm gonna just set this up here on the windowsill. And I put it there because then I won't forget that it's there. If I tuck it away somewhere else, I might forget it. So, okay you guys, so to finish up the seed saving video for saving tomato seeds, I started the video and I took the seeds out of the tomato on Monday. It is now Thursday morning. I should have gotten to it yesterday to rinse the seeds off, but I didn't. And that's okay. There's a little bit of forgiveness on this one because, you know, they're not going to rot right away. So one thing I did want to say was that we have several different sized sieves. We have a few other ones. But when you go to rinse your tomato seeds, make sure, like this one has a really fine mesh to it. And so the tomato gel and the bits of tomato won't go through it. And so it's harder to rinse the tomatoes. So I don't use that one. This one, the holes are too big and your tomatoes will go through it and you'll lose your tomato seeds. So this is the one that I use. It has big enough holes to let the tomato through but keep the seeds in. So what I'm going to do is I take my paper towel, where I wrote the name, and see the I don't know if you can see this, but the tomato seeds are starting to form a little bit of mold on top of them. And then I just dump them in there, and I use cold water to rinse. Blast the seeds out. So that mold, there's no seeds in there. I'll just set that to the side. And then I just and there we go. We have nice, clean tomato seeds. So then I take them. Okay, none of them are left in the sieve. So if they pile up too much, I'll spread them out a little bit, but they're not too piled up. And then one thing I have learned is take something heavy, make sure there's no tomato seeds under it, and put it on top of the paper towel. Because once this dries, if a gust of wind comes through, if you have a fan on or a window open, it'll come through and it will blow your paper towel with all your seeds off. And then next thing you know, you're picking tomato seeds up off the ground. And I've experienced that more than once, so I've finally figured out, put something on your plate that will hold it down. And I'm going to just let this dry for several days, week. You want to make sure that they are super, super dry, and then put them away in, I tend to use like little jars, vitamin jars. You can do Ziploc bags. You just want to make sure that there is no moisture in there, or else your seeds will mold and they won't be usable. So super simple, super easy. And it's nice to have the clean seeds that don't have any gel. Now if they stick to the paper towel once they dry, which they will do, just take your fingernail, scrape them off. If they stick together, just kind of pop them loose. Seeds are somewhat delicate, but they are forgiving. I mean, think about it. They have to live out in the wild. you know, animals are eating tomatoes, it goes through the digestive tract, it's getting pooped out, you know, it goes through winter. They can handle quite a bit. Anyway, that's my seed saving.